Hello, everyone. I launched Prezi at a conference very similar to this conference, actually, but I had a lot at stake. I had a lot at stake because I left my home country where I was born in Sweden and moved to the country where my parents are from, which is actually Hungary. And I wanted to build my next company from there because even though it was a little bit unexpected place, thanks to my parents, I had gotten to know that there is a lot of talented people for me to work with there. And I also had a lot at stake because I knew there were better ways of sharing ideas than my current tool set. And I knew if we could inspire people to share more ideas, it would do good in the world. And I had a lot at stake because I was running out of money. At the time when we were getting ready to launch Prezi, we had been working already for many, many months. And I only had 2 months left of living expenses on my bank account. So I knew I had to make it count. And so I decided to go to the next web conference in Amsterdam and be one of the 100 companies to pitch my company. And I knew that it was going to be hard to be noticed. So what did I come up with? Well, I put on a suit and a tie. I put on a suit and a tie because at a lot of these conferences, there's just fewer ties. And by the time I was getting ready on the stage, I was actually very well set because people had noticed me. Even people had started to give me snarky comments about how I was dressed. So I was getting ready and I had a plan. I was going to go onto the stage and I was going to lift my tie and I was going to say, slides are like ties are. They can be confining. They can keep you from delivering your message. But if you break free, then you can share amazingly creative ideas. And then I was going to wink to the moderator who was going to sit over there and come to the stage and help me cut off my tie, only I see that he's not paying attention to me. Hello? Stop flirting with the girl next to you. I got off the stage 5 minutes later. I was all sweaty. I was thinking back at everyone in Budapest and how I had failed them completely. And now I had only 2 months left to get a job at Ericsson. Until the moderator actually comes up, finally, and asks the crowd, how many of you would be actually willing to pay for this product? And half of the audience raises their hands. That was the first time ever that I knew that we were onto something big. And from there on, everything started to go really quickly. TechCrunch came out with this article, the Prezi being the coolest presentation tool ever. And soon enough, I got also a meeting with Chris Anderson, the head curator for TED. I only got 20 minutes, because it's TED. And Chris Anderson thought I would talk to him about this new presentation tool, but actually what I talked to him about is that he should make his first ever investment into Prezi. And after 18 minutes, he decided yes. And soon after, Excel, the first ever investor in Facebook, joined as well. And together with a third VC, Sunstone Capital, we actually managed to go global. We opened up offices in the US and in Asia as well. And Prezi has exceeded my wildest expectations. Already, the first year, we became cash flow positive. That is fairly special, particularly if you start asking around other startups, you'll see that this is unique. In fact, just in the last year, we've added 19 million new users who started creating Prezi presentation, and the year is not finished. But it's not just that people are using Prezi more and more. We are providing jobs for people as well. Today, there is actually 160 people working with Prezi because we're doubling the team every year. And there are Prezi experts and trainers and designers who help people to get started with Prezi. And there are 83 books that have been written about Prezi today. In fact, there are even cartoons being drawn about people using Prezi. This one is from Korea. So everywhere around the world, we can see Prezi users now. This is Bono doing a Prezi on the TED stage, and I'm so proud, so I had to show you guys this picture. And what we're learning is that Prezi is actually a better way of sharing ideas. We're learning this through science, through cognitive scientists who have explained to me now that for millions of years, your brain has actually evolved to organize information in the form of landmarks. Landmarks that are objects and have directions, so that when you exit your cave, go to the right by the stone, go to the left by the tree, and then you find your berries. It turns out that good Prezis are just like this. So let's say you want to build a startup pitch. Well, you can tell it in the form of climbing a mountain. If you are a team of 3 people, 1 alien, and then decide to go around the risks to reach your vision, which is the final goal of your company, it turns out that it looks very much like a group of landmarks. And when you tell a visual journey like this in the form of Prezi, then we know today that people will understand, remember, and even like your story a little bit better. And so it's been a really hard work to get here, and I'm incredibly proud, particularly of the fact that we managed to build a globally successful company from an unexpected place like Hungary. But the more I think about Prezi, the more I realize that we are just a tiny part in a much larger movement. In a movement where you guys are the activists. What does this movement look like? Well, people are coming to conferences like this one, and the number of visitors are just growing every year. In fact, these conferences are sprouting everywhere around the globe. And even though we usually talk about the fun things of doing a startup at a conference like this, the truth is we have a lot of responsibility as well. We don't care to acknowledge that we have a really hard job. The truth is that particularly here in Europe, we're seeing amazingly bad unemployment numbers, youth unemployment numbers that are higher than ever in history. And even though we are not the cause of this issue, we are a part of the solution. It's you who can create the companies and the job opportunities that these people need. So what we're dealing with here at this conference is actually really, really important. And there is some good news. There has never been a better time to build a globally successful company than today. Take a look at these numbers. What you see here is an average lifespan of a global successful company throughout history. And what you see is that the average lifespan of globally successful companies, the 500 top ones, have gone from more than 60 years to a mere 18 today. In fact, when I look into the future, our projections say that we will have even decreasing number of years. What does this mean? It means that never ever in history have you been able to build a globally successful company so quickly as today. What does this look like? Well, one of the companies that were on this list was Kodak, a 130-year-old company that went bust last year. But last year was really interesting as well because another company that was only 2 years old, called Instagram, got bought for $1 billion. And they were in the same business as Kodak. How can it be that a company with 130 years of experience could not compete with a young company of 2 years of age? The answer is creativity. You know, people wonder about this creativity, and they also mention that, yeah, what do you think? Is Google an example of a young and creative company? And I say, yeah. Google is a creative company. They move beyond the search engine. They think about cars. They think about healthcare. They think about glasses. But they are actually not a young company anymore. If they survive the next few years, they will become a Kodak, pushing up the averages. And I know that the only way they will be able to survive is by thinking creatively, by constantly redefining who they are and what they do. Okay, so if creativity is the answer to build global success in a few years, then is it easy to do this? Well, when I heard creativity just a few years ago, this word was kind of intimidating to me. I thought that creativity, it was reserved for people who are geniuses, scientists, and artists. But from the Prezi users, I'm actually learning that creativity is a mindset. Prezi users use Prezi because they believe that creativity is more important than experience. And from them, we have started to learn what is the kind of mindset differences that make them use Prezi. So, if you're intrinsically motivated, and if you are able to make yourself vulnerable, and if you're able to challenge your basic assumptions, then you have a creative mindset, and you're likely to be a Prezi user. But the mere fact that you guys all are here would make me think that you actually have this creative mindset, irrespective of if you're a Prezi user or not. Why? Because you have to be able to say yes to these questions to do such a crazy thing as a startup. And when you do a startup like this, then actually the results are usually great. Like the story of Spotify. Daniel, who built Spotify, was intrinsically motivated to build Spotify because he loved music. He wanted to listen to more music. But he also made himself vulnerable because he admitted that he was actually terrible at doing music himself. And he also admitted that he was listening music through illegal ways. Talk about making yourself vulnerable. And he challenged a really basic assumption. Why couldn't you listen to all the world's music legally for free? That's the idea behind Spotify. And when I talk about the importance of creativity, then usually VCs come to me and they say, yeah, Peter, you know, ideas, there are a dime a dozen of ideas, but it's all about the execution. And yes, execution is of course really important, but when I started Prezi 4 years ago, I had access to more information about how to execute a company than a person who started a company 15 years ago in Silicon Valley. Why? Because I have YouTube, I have TechCrunch, and I have email. Spotify wasn't started from Silicon Valley. Neither SoundCloud. It was started from Stockholm and Berlin. We truly belong to a new generation of young people who know that our careers will not be defined by getting a job with a company and then riding that out to the end of our lives. We know that the only way we can build success is by constantly redefining who we are and what we do. And this is what makes creativity trumps over experience. And so if this is true, can we then show that this is happening in more places around the world? My favorite example comes from Estonia. Estonia came out of the socialist era, much like Hungary, disillusioned by its future, and for many years there wasn't a lot of exciting things that happened. But I think there was one thing that was truly inspirational for Estonia. And when Skype opened up offices there, and then sold the company for $2.5 billion. That was the first time Skype was sold, yes. $130 million went directly to Estonian employees. And that money started funding new companies. But this is not what's important about Skype in Estonia. What's important about Skype in Estonia is the fact that people started believing that they could compete on a global market, not by experience, but by creativity. Even in my hometown in Budapest, I see that these changes is happening right now. In the last few years, we have 3 globally successful companies coming out just in the last few years. LogMeIn is traded on NASDAQ for $750 million, and that's just based on the last 7 years of work. And Ustream, they are serving 80 million people streaming video on their mobile devices every month. And I already told you about Prezi, but what I haven't told you about Prezi is that in Budapest, we have gathered people from 26 different countries who have moved to Budapest, not only because they want to learn about high tech and how to build successful companies, but because Budapest has some of the greatest parties at night. In fact, if you haven't been to Budapest, go and try it out, because we have some of the best bars in the world. Lonely Planet says this as well. We even have an amazing engineer from Ukraine now, Katya, and we're so proud to have her with us, and I hope that we will have more Ukrainian people joining us as well. But really, what I'm learning from all of this is that when we shift over to a world where creativity is more important than experience, then something remarkable changes. All of a sudden, the playing field is leveled. No matter who you are, what kind of background you have, where you're from, you have a chance to take part in this, as long as you're willing to find your inner motivation, be vulnerable, and challenge your assumptions. And of course, you cannot afford to avoid being successful in the world's biggest market, US. You cannot afford to disregard the technological hub that is Silicon Valley. We have offices there as well. But you don't have to start there. You can start from anywhere around the world. The only thing that you have to do is to really trust your creative ideas. Thank you.
Stay with me 1 second. Stay with me. First, I'm Italian, okay? So I really feel when you say you can start something from wherever in the world, I really feel, and I think people in Kiev feel the same. We're not in Silicon Valley, so how can we do? But it's true, now it's changing. That's why I moved to live in UK, by the way. I'm joking. No, but it is really true. But tell me, what was your reaction when Chris Sanderson wrote you and say, you know, Chris Sanderson is really a huge name, and say, it's interesting and I would like to invest. What was your reaction? Like, okay, or whoa?
No. So Chris Anderson didn't want to invest to begin with. In fact,
Okay.
I had been working so hard to get just a meeting with him.
All right.
And then finally, I got a 1-hour meeting. So I used the very last money on my bank account to buy a ticket to New York.
Okay.
And as I arrive in New York, I get an email that, sorry, Chris doesn't have time to meet you.
Gosh.
And
What
I
have
was,
you done?
I was really sad and disappointed, clearly. But then I managed to guilt trip his secretary and say, hey, you know, I came all the way from Budapest, and this is my last money. Could you please find some time for me to meet Chris? And then she said, okay, we'll give you 20 minutes. You know, the ironic thing about that is 20 minutes is the time of the TED Talk,
Yes.
right? And so I get 20 minutes, and Chris Anderson thinks that I will tell him about this new presentation tool
Okay.
that his presenters can use. But what I wanted to tell him is that this is the perfect opportunity for TED to invest in a company.
Okay. Gosh. Good.
And so actually in
It
18
was.
minutes, I managed to convince him to do it, and we were shaking hands by the end of the meeting.
Unbelievable.
Probably the most successful pitch I've ever done in my life.
Thanks a lot. Peter Arvai again. Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much.